So, professionalism. Please don't wait until the end to ask questions. Ask your questions as we go along. Otherwise, you're going to forget what you wanted to ask, and then when we finally get there, it's not relevant anymore. So, what is professionalism? We hear so much about the importance of being professional, but what does it actually mean? What makes one person more professional than another one? Well, professionalism is actually quite a difficult concept to define because it encompasses so many different things. But in a nutshell, it has to do with the way a person conducts themselves. We're going to look at how they conduct themselves specifically in the workplace, but it can also refer to your personal lives as well. Professionalism is a vitally important issue because a professional and ethical reputation is often the difference between success and failure, and sometimes even more so than technical excellence. There's not a long list of academic requirements, skills, or work experience that defines a professional geoscientist. However, the descriptions here give you some idea of the different hallmarks of a professional. My laser pointer. Things like competence, integrity, accountability, and high ethical standards. As you'll see, these are not geoscience specific, but they're universal life skills. Being a professional, or being a professional, or professionalism rather, is not about being a geoscientist. It's about being professional in everything that you do. Now, in the fields of engineering and geoscience, as with many other international fields of practice, professionalism is based upon three pillars: registration, continuing professional development, and ethics and professional conduct. So we'll take these one at a time. In South Africa, registration actually falls into two different categories. The first is statutory registration, and then also membership of a professional body. A question that people often ask is, well, why do we want to be registered? Why do we need to be registered? Well, primarily it provides you a certain level of formal recognition of your knowledge and experience. And in South Africa, as in many parts of the world, registration with a statutory body is becoming the norm. It tells your employers, your clients, and the general public that you've got the required academic qualifications, as well as the applicable practical experience to do the job that you say that you do. And particularly in this day when we have fake qualifications, the fact that we are registered gives our clients, gives our employers the confidence that we are who we say we are. And also, as geoscientists, you're typically going to be involved in the estimation of mineral resources and reserves on a mine. And it's quite likely at some stage in your career, you're going to be called on to sign off as a competent person on a public document. And in order to do so, you will need to be registered with one or other statutory or professional body. A caveat, however, registration does not necessarily equate to competent. It also doesn't mean that you are going to be able to do the job well. We'll talk about this a little more later, but registration just says that you have the necessary knowledge and the skills to be able to do your job. Right, so if we look at a statutory registration, this is currently in South Africa falling under the SACNASP Act of 2003. And it falls under the Department of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. The mandate of the SACNASP Council is to register, regulate, and enable. It's there to improve standards, to enhance your status, and also to manage any sort of liabilities. Notice that SACNASP is the registering authority for geoscientists. Section 18 of the Act says that you may not practice in any of the fields listed in Schedule 1, and the ones that refer to us are the geological field of practice and the earth sciences field of practice. So you may not practice in any of these fields unless you are registered with SACNASP. It also goes on to say in Section 20 that only a registered person may practice in a consulting capacity. And also Section 26 deals with the requirements for voluntary associations in order to comply with, qualify for recognition within SACNASP. Just to note that what we've been speaking about here is the SACNASP Act of 2003. This is currently in the process of being updated with the Natural Scientific Professions Bill 2019, which is currently with Parliament before it goes out for public consultation. And here are the main differences between the old and the new. And the only ones that I'm going to mention is this one here. It's going to become obligatory for everyone to practice at any level without being registered. So currently you might be able to work for a company where somebody there is registered. Going forward, you will need to be registered. Each individual geoscientist will need to be registered if they are working in the geoscience field. It will also become obligatory for employers to only employ registered natural scientists. So what are the benefits of registration? Well, firstly, it's legally required. You can be recognized as a professional internationally. They have a benchmark code of conduct, facilitate their CPD, and there's also access to mentorship. This is the pretty little infographic that SACNASP put out, that you can identify the benefits of registration. Yes, Dave?
One of the benefits is also you can get some professional indemnity through SACNASP as well, at a lower rate.
Yes, yes, indeed. That is a very useful one. Thank you. I'm not sure why I forgot that off the slide. Okay, so there are a number of different categories in which a person can be registered, and the one that we're all looking to get to is the professional, the PR signet, and that requires a 4-year degree or equivalent, plus at least 3 years practical experience. There is also the recognition of prior learning, a way to get registered as well. We have the certificated as well as the candidate registration. But this one here is the only one that will allow you to sign off on public documents as a competent person. SACNASP also has a student initiative, which means that you can register for free as a student in your final year. And it gives you access to the whole of the SACNASP website, training, mentorship, and invitations to various other events which are hosted by SACNASP. Right, so that is statutory registration. The second type of registration or membership that we're going to talk about is that of a professional body. And obviously, I'm going to be talking to you about the Geological Society as a professional member, professional body. The GSSA is not only a professional body, it is also a learned or scientific organization. So what it does is it provides you a professional home. It also provides you with a number of benefits in your academic career, in further learning. And I'll go through some of these in a moment. We are one of the accredited voluntary associations with SACNASP, and the membership procedure. Everything is referenced to the constitution of the GSSA. So by being a member, you agree to the code of ethics, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and subject yourself to the complaints and disciplinary procedure. And I just want to highlight here, we have, in order to advance the status of professionals, we've developed the chartered status, which is required for people wanting to sign off on public reports using their GSSA membership. We have a number of different categories within the GSSA. The corporate, that is the normal membership and or fellowship. We have the corporate membership with chartered status for signing off on public documents. We have student membership, which is free. And even if you're not a geoscience person, but you would like to become affiliated with the GSSA, we have the affiliate membership category and also the institutional category for companies. Whether you're a mining company, an exploration company, or within the service industry. Some of the specific benefits of belonging to the GSSA. We have a professional code of ethics, and we do a CPD program. All of these I'm going to be talking about a little bit later. We have scientific and technical meetings, one of which you're sitting in right now, where we have a number of free and paid events, live and recorded. We do contact, we do hybrid, and we're moving ahead with networking events as well. And I hope most of you are going to the networking event on Thursday evening, certainly those of you who are in Joburg. If you're not in Joburg, you might want to belong to one of the various branches and divisions. The REI fund is there to provide access to funds for research activities. We have the Geobulletin and the newsletter that you get to see what is happening where. The SAJG is an internationally recognized and highly accredited journal. As a recognized professional organization with the majority of international organizations, we provide training and support for competent persons and other international reciprocity where it is applicable. We also provide mentorship opportunities. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. And we have various international, regional, and local alliances. But it's also not only about what we can do for you. It's also about what you as a professional geoscientist can contribute back to the industry. Specifically in terms of providing mentorship to younger members, but also being role models and examples of professionalism. Okay, so earlier we mentioned that simply because you registered with SACNASP or are a member of a professional body does not mean that you are necessarily competent. So what's the difference? Well, if we look at registration, that says that you've got the academic qualifications that you say that you have. It says that you have the work experience that you say you have. And it says that you have sufficient practical and technical experience to be able to do the job. Competence, however, this is the ability to actually do the job. Okay, so competence is comprised of knowledge, skills, and also attitudes. Can be compared to an iceberg. And we only see about 10% of an iceberg. And the knowledge and skills, that's pretty much what people see of our competence. And that really only works about 10%. By far the larger proportion of competence, these are the things that people don't see easily. It's our attitude, our values, our personal standards, our motives that largely go unnoticed, except when they let us down. So, knowledge. Knowledge is based on qualifications. Now, most of you here today have your degree, which should give you knowledge, but not always. Nor does it mean that if you know what to do, that you can do it well. And once we've acquired some knowledge, well, we can't just stagnate. This quote here from Eric Hoffer says it all. You can never stop learning, or you're going to very quickly become out of date. And we'll expand upon this in the next section on continuing professional development. Okay, skills. Skills refers to the ability to apply our knowledge to specific situations. You obviously cannot develop skills without knowledge. Simplistically, we can divide skills up into two categories, which is the technical or hard skills. These tend to be occupational and job specific. The soft skills, by contrast, well, these are non-technical skills that don't always relate directly to your job description. These are general characteristics that help employees to thrive in the workplace. They can also be called transferable skills or interpersonal skills, and they include such things as communication, critical thinking, decision-making abilities, and a wide range of management, business, and leadership skills. Soft skills are often intangible and difficult to quantify. But at the same time, they're also more important to success than the hard skills. I'd like to refer you to this study here, which was done at Harvard, Carnegie, and Stanford some years ago, that showed that only 15% of your job success is related to technical knowledge and hard skills. A whopping 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft skills and interpersonal skills. Now, this can often be difficult for us as geoscientists because we're typically hardwired to the practical aspects of our jobs. Very good at technical skills. So developing all of these soft skills is something that we all need to work on getting. We mentioned that competence also progresses in proficiency. Now, there's a time element involved in becoming proficient at something. By and large, the more you do something, the better you should be at it. But having said, simply because the person has been doing something for 20 years does not necessarily mean that they are proficient at it. And unfortunately, over your careers, you are going to meet individuals who have been around for many years and who may be in senior positions, but they might not actually be proficient at what they do. The time taken to become proficient is not going to be the same for everybody or for every skill, because some people might become proficient at a particular skill in a short time, while others might take a much longer time. Or you might become proficient at one skill quickly, but another skill might take you many years to master. And just a note here that an expert is not somebody who knows it all, but who knows just how little that they actually do know. But the third leg of competence is attitudes. And here's a list of a number of attitudes. You'll note that none of these are geoscience specifics. These are attitudes that you're going to need in all aspects of your life. Right, so the next leg of professionalism is continuing professional development. Why do we need to continue learning? Surely once we've got our degrees, we know enough to do our jobs. Well, knowledge has a half-life. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's 8 years or whatever it might be. We all pretty soon start to realize that if we don't keep up with what's happening in our field of practice, we will fall behind and become irrelevant. So if we want to become the go-to person in our chosen field, or if we want to remain the go-to person in our chosen field, we need to continue our professional development throughout our lives. Just think for yourself, what skills or knowledge has changed since you left school and started university? or for those among you who've been around for a little while. Let me go back to that one. And Nadira, you will get a copy of these slides, so you don't need to write it down. I'll send the PDF to you later today. And just a couple of examples. Some of you will remember log tables. Nobody uses a log table today, but we all had to learn them at school. Nowadays, we use calculators. Back in the day, we used to type things up on a typewriter. Then we moved to word processors, and finally to computers. You need to continue to change and learn what is happening. Right, so CPD, it's a term that we use to describe learning activities that we take part in to develop and enhance skills after our first degree. It's effectively a logbook. Now, whether it be a physical or a digital logbook of what you experience, learn, and apply. This can be things such as courses, workshops, informal learning opportunities, anything that helps you expand your knowledge or add new skills. Some of the important things about your CPD program, excuse me, it is self-driven. You decide what it is that you need to learn. It's not for your employer to tell you that you need to do X, Y, and Z courses. It's not for your registration authority to say that you need to attend this and you need to do that. It is driven by you yourself. It is your ongoing program of personal development. So it helps you to keep up to date with the latest advancements in your field of practice. And your CPD program is likely to be very different to the person sitting next to you in the office. Different needs, different requirements, different gaps in your skill sets. Now, most professional organizations have online portals for logging your CPD credits. And most of them are structured so that you only need to follow one program. Now, with respect to SACNASP and GSSA, for example, you don't need to log your CPD credits in both the SACNASP system as well as the GSSA system. SACNASP and GSSA have signed an MOU so that wherever you choose to record your credits will be mutually recognized by the other organization. Now, it's important to note that compliance with one system is deemed to be compliance with the other. What that means is if you log it in one system, it's not going to miraculously show up in the other system. You still have to print out your compliance document and post it in the other dashboard. They're not exactly the same systems, but compliance is deemed. Now, CPD is not only for geoscientists working in industry. It's just as important for those who are employed in academia, in research, and even in governmental institutions. The SACNASP CPD system, they have a 5-year cycle. Yes, Dave? Dave?
Also for independent geological consultants need it.
Yes, yeah, they, in my way of thinking, are part of industry geologists, geoscientists. But yes, no matter who you are, where you're working, CPD is fundamentally important. So it's probably more so important as a consultant. Anyway, going back to SACNAS, they have a 5-year CPD cycle, and you will need 25 credits in a 5-year cycle, which is effectively 5 credits a year. And the current cycle is from April 2022, which finishes in March 2027. There are 3 categories in which to claim credits. That is formal learning, work-based activities and mentoring, and the individual activities, and also being a member of a voluntary association. Under SACNASP, you need to obtain credits in at least 2 out of the 3. Category 1 is obligatory. You have to get CPD credits in the formal learning category, and then at least 1 of the other 2. If you're doing it under the GSSA banner, we have 4 different categories. And while we have all 4 categories, none of these categories are obligatory. We encourage our members to collect points across the whole spectrum, if at all possible. Now, here is just a quick summary of the various things that are examples of what can be included in your CPD program. But if you want to know more, come back, I think it is in March, middle of March next year, where we have the CPD workshop, where we go in depth into what is required, both under SACNASP as well as under the GSSA system. Right, so the third leg then is ethics and professional conduct. We'll come back to ethics itself a little later, but I'd like to spend some time now just looking at conduct that might be considered professional or non-professional, as the case may be. Here's a list of some of the behaviors that impact on our being perceived as professional. And again, as we said earlier, these are just as applicable to academic as well as applied environments. It doesn't matter whether you continue your career in academia or whether you work on a mine or in consulting. These professional behaviors will be expected of you. And in fact, most of these behaviors are applicable even if you move out of the direct geoscience field. Okay, so undue influence. You can be sure that if you are involved with mining, at some stage in your career, you are going to come face to face with interference from some powerful group. In some instances, this is going to be political interference. For example, if you work in coal, issues of unions versus ESG activists. But more often than not, it's going to be indirect and direct pressure by various stakeholders. Now, sometimes it's going to be your company boss or corporate shareholder wanting to maximize profits. Other times it might be local communities, suppliers or subcontractors, each one with their own agendas. Also, what happens when the company or client asks you to write a favorable report for a significant sum of money, even though you know the project is rubbish? Remember, if you don't do as they ask, you might not get paid, or at the very least, you won't get asked to work for this person again. And of course, probably one of the most difficult situations to deal with is when you might have to make a choice between doing a job that you're not capable of doing and not doing the job at all. And this can be particularly difficult if you are unemployed at the time. How you deal with these issues? Well, that says an awful lot about your professional attitude. Insider trading. Working as a geoscientist, you will at some stage in your career be privy to confidential company information. For example, you may know that your company is about to open a new mine, which is going to cause the stock price to rise. Or you might come to know that you're going to be taken over by a foreign company and the stock is now going to be worthless. Insider trading regulations will prevent you from acting on that information by buying or selling your own shares. Just to note that these same regulations do not prevent you from holding shares in the company that you work for. Some company codes of conduct specify how many shares you might hold in your own company without declaring your holdings, and most of us will never get to that level in our lifetimes. Besides, the normal investor might hold these shares as part of a greater portfolio, or one that is managed by an investment company, and in which case this does not apply to you at all. Where the insider trading regulations come in is that they prevent you from buying or selling your shares on the basis of information that's not in the public domain, or on the basis of information that you've obtained because of your job and that the general public would not have access to. It's also important to remember that these regulations don't only apply to you as the geoscientist, but also would prevent you from passing this information on, whether it be your elderly parents, or your brother who has recently lost his job, or a family that has a new baby to care for. Research integrity. Research integrity is not just an academic concept. Over your careers, you're going to do a lot of research. You'll work with junior and senior colleagues, as well as peers on various reports, whether it be for a client or for your employer. Research integrity means that you will make sure that you present accurate results, not just the results you know they want you to write about. You might also get involved in reviewing academic theses or journal papers. Research integrity would require that you be fair and honest in these reviews, even if you don't necessarily agree with their conclusions. Now, that would be their conclusions on a factual basis, not on a personal basis. It would also reflect on how you interact with people that you work for and how you deal with real or potential conflicts of interest. Plagiarism. We all know that plagiarism is That's an unforgivable academic sin. But plagiarism in the work environment is also no more acceptable. And here for your reference are just a number of different common types of plagiarism. Just to highlight that plagiarism is an ethical issue. It's not a legal one. Copyright infringement, on the other hand, is a legal issue, but it's also an ethical issue. Now, copyright infringements are just so easy. You just photocopy the chapter, and then we justify it because the price of books is just so ridiculous. We can't afford to buy the book. We're poor students, so we're unemployed. We've just started working, and we've got other more important expenses. So it's okay. No, it's not okay. Copyright infringement is actually against the law. Just inserted a slide here on AI GPT. If you haven't tried it, and I don't think there's anybody who hasn't tried it, but make sure that you do, because it can be a very useful tool. Very simply, we need to be aware of some of the plagiarism and ethical issues that can arise with AI GPT tools. Because as these bots trawl through their database or the internet, they pick up sentences here and there and string them together, and they don't always give correct attribution. Sometimes they don't give any attribution. So be aware that while using GPT can be a very useful tool, just be aware of these issues that do go along with it, besides the fact that they don't always tell the truth. Okay, coming back to some of the other issues of professional conduct: harassment, bullying, and discrimination. Now, to be clear, this is never okay. And even in today's world, we come across these issues in all places where we have more than one person, whether it be in your workplace, out in the field, at conferences, in the educational environment, and even in cyberspace. So do be aware of where these things can occur. Highlights a number of different ways that harassment can be expressed, whether it be verbal, written, physical behaviors, images or recordings, and the various issues of discrimination. And just to note that the GSSA has a formal position on issues of harassment, bullying, and discrimination. You'll find it in our Code of Ethics, as well as in the complaints and disciplinary procedures. And we even have a portfolio, the membership and transformation portfolio is there to address these relevant issues. So it is something that the GSSA as a professional body take very seriously. And one of the issues that I do want to highlight is that of sexual harassment. As geoscientists, you're working in typically a male-dominated environment. So, gentlemen, how you treat your female colleagues, peers, juniors, and superiors, especially in the company of other men, will say a lot about you as professionals. Ladies, how you treat your male counterparts is no less important. Other aspect I want to touch on at this stage is how you as professional geoscientists treat those in the industry who cannot advance your career. Here I'm referring to junior colleagues, to non-geoscientists, students, guests, exhibitors, vendors, contractors, admin staff, cleaners. Do you treat them all with the same courtesy and respect that you would treat your professors or your employers? So the bottom line is treat everyone else with the same dignity and respect that you would like them to treat you. And one final word with respect to this discussion. Is it always discrimination? If you don't get the job, is it because of your color, your race, your gender, or whatever? Sometimes you're just not the best person for the job. Okay, moving on then to the issue of mentorship. This is a very special way of contributing to the continuity of education to the next generation. And it is something that we would encourage all professionals to volunteer for. There are many professional bodies that have formal structures for mentoring, such as these that you can see here, different professional organizations. Also, many of the larger companies have formal programs, but probably the most amount of mentoring, coaching, training, tutoring, call it what you want, these take place in informal settings. Now, in any program, we always have far more mentee applications than we've got mentors, which is why I have included this mantra here, which was first coined in the surgery field. See one, do one, teach one. So initially, under the C1, make yourself available for mentorship as a mentee. Then take the time to build your career, which is the do one. And the teach one, don't forget to come back and volunteer as a mentor to help with the next generation. And if you do want to assist with mentorship, and of course this is a plea for our next batch of mentees, please send a mail to info@gssa.org.za. Use mentorship as the subject line, or mark it for the attention of Nolene Pauls, who, as usual, is looking for volunteer mentors. Something we don't often think about with respect to professional behaviors. How we dress, how we manage our time. There are two questions I'd like you to ask yourself. And I'd like to see a show of hands, please. Does what you wear say anything about your competence? Does it say anything about how well you do your job? Maria? Maria, would you like to comment? Okay, so as everybody says, the short answer is no. What you wear has absolutely nothing to do with how good you are at doing your job. Right, now the second question. Does how you dress say anything about how professional you are or about your professionalism? Nadira, would you like to make a comment?
I don't think it says how good you are at your job, but it does tell you something about character, like every aspect of how you behave. You say you can gauge character from it, and that's a small influence. That has a small influence on everything, on your manner and how you do your job, and possibly how you might interact. But there are cases where some people look really spiffy all the time, and they might not be very good at the job either. Oh, I should stop there.
Maria, you got anything to add on that? You have to unmute yourself.
Maybe can I add something?
Yes, please.
I think both aspects just show the level of consistency, like in your character, as other people are saying, that like look, not to say that you're judging a book by its cover, but it just tends to look like you're very consistent with everything, to say like, look, you're very good at your job and you dress well, you present yourself well, you're putting the brand in good light. I think it just puts you like in a very different category of a professional, to say like, okay, just basically consistent throughout in the way you do your things. I think that's how I'd look at it.
Thank you. Yes, everybody's getting the right idea here, that what you wear doesn't say anything about how good you are at doing your job. And it also doesn't say that if you always wear a fancy suit or a skirt and heels, doesn't necessarily mean that you are great at your job either. It has a lot to do with what is appropriate for the job at hand. In other words, if you're out in the field mapping, but you are dressed like that, or at a drill site, not only would I worry about your professionalism, I would worry about your sanity as well. But at the same time, if you pitched up like that to accept an award at a prestigious gala dinner event, that would also not be appropriate. Nadira, have you got a question?
No, I don't. I should just put my hand down.
Okay. So it's more about what is appropriate for the job at hand. Further on that, our dress is important not only day to day, but when we do presentations or when we're going for a job interview. Remember, you must be the star of the show, not what you're wearing. You don't want to be wearing anything less casual than your audience. Now, remember, you're in the mining industry and generally asking somebody for money at some stage. So conservative is generally more appropriate. Senior management, investment bankers, lawyers, so forth, people that you might be interacting with, they really don't care about your individual style. They want to hear the professional you. There's nothing wrong with expressing your individuality through fashion in private. But unless your presentation is in front of a hip, fashionable audience, which the mining industry is not, it is best to stick to a professional dress code. But we spend a lot of time in video conferences. Even with contact events coming back into fashion, you will still spend a lot of time in virtual events and have online meetings with colleagues or clients all over the world.
Did you win? No. Did you try what I told you? Did you try what I told you?
So when in a video conference, it's inappropriate to have duck-faced selfies or sexy suggestive poses as your photo ID. Usually go for the standard head and shoulders, company logo, or something more formal. And one of the things that I'm very pleased to see, that no longer do we have quirky names on the as name labels. More and more people are realizing that the formal name or your company organization is the way to go. How we manage our time also says a lot about how we are perceived. Here are some of the issues that we need to pay attention to. Being on time. Or are you that guy who is always late for everything? No matter what time the meeting is, the person who always comes 10 minutes late. Do you pay attention while you're at the meeting? Are you present? Or do you spend all your time on your phone or doing something else while the meeting is in progress? And this can be something particularly difficult, especially with online meetings, because nobody can see you. Are you present? Are you there doing what you need to do? Are you productive? Now, being productive is not just about getting a certain amount of work done. It's also about using less to create more, to work smarter and not just harder. And how do we manage our time, our productivity, not only in the office, but also while working from home? Now, in our lives, there are things that are, yes, Veronica.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that. I was still trying to find my speaker to unmute.
Okay.
Just on the previous slide, time management. You know, I don't know if you would call it, I've got that situation currently. I don't know if you would call it bias or whatnot. What do you deal, how do you deal then with people who have somewhat legit reasons to this issue, meaning they're neurodivergent and therefore they're struggling with this part of their life? It's not that they're incompetent, they can't do their work or anything like that. It's just, that's how just their minds are wired. So how would you deal with such people?
Okay, remember, we are not talking here about people who are not able to do a job or don't have the tools for the job or not competent to do that job. We're talking about how you can manage your time. If you have a job to do, how do you manage your time to get that job done well? And I'm going to just ask you to bear with me as we go into the next two slides.
All right.
Because when we look at our lives, we have important things that we need to do. We have urgent things that we need to do. Some things are both urgent and important. Some things are just important but not urgent, or urgent but not important, and not urgent and not important. So we want to look at our time and see, where do we spend most of our time? So we want to analyze our own life, our own workspace, and prioritize. It's the only way that we can get everything done is to set priorities. So going back to your query, Veronica, a person would need to prioritize what needs to be done and set aside time in order to do that. But also too, if we go on to the next slide, I'm sure most of you have seen this experiment. You take a large glass jar and you fill it with sand, rocks, water, and pebbles. How much you can get into the jar says a lot about how you manage your time. Because either we land up with all of the sand at the bottom, the little pebbles, and then the big rocks don't fit in. Or if you put the big rocks in first, followed by the pebbles, followed by the sand, which then seeps down in between the pebbles, and finally you can fill that up with water. That is now an explanation as to how we can get all the important things in our lives done. Because to get the best out of a limited amount of time, we need to get our priorities right. So that means first schedule the important tasks, which is the rocks, the big things in our lives, our goals, our objectives. This would include our direct families and our jobs. Now, in our working, this could be becoming the mineral resource manager, making partner in a consulting firm, or getting qualified as a competent person. So once you've got the big rocks in place, then you deal with the pebbles, the important and the urgent tasks, like finishing the assignment that's sitting on your desk, or getting your technical report submitted by the due date. This could also include taking care of our emotional or spiritual well-being, including certain extended family obligations. Only then do you deal with the sand. These are the myriads of things that we've got in our life that distract us. This is the leisure activities, other unimportant, non-urgent and trivial time wasters. All the things that we would much rather be doing than work. Yes, there is place for these things in your life, but that place is not first place. Dave, yes?
For the last 30 years, I've been having a hard copy diary. In it, I plan my day. The first thing is my cup of coffee in the morning. And in it, it has all these things scheduled out, even going to the gym or doctor's appointments that fit around my work, not other people's work. It's a very useful, handy tool to have.
Yes, I'm just thinking that's a very interesting way of doing it. And then a person can see just where your time goes to. So going back then to the illustration, we've had a look at the major priorities, the important or the urgent but often not so important issues, as well as the sand. And then if you took your bowl and you poured water into it, there'd still be place. So there's always time for a beer with your buddies, but make sure you got all the rocks in first. Another issue that I want to highlight is geovandalism. We are all aware of the destruction or vandalism that takes place at national heritage sites, such as Canteen Koppie here near Berkeley West. Also the destruction of name plaques at Cape Point or Dwarsrivier. Various other graffiti vandalism at heritage sites. But does it matter if it is a national heritage site or just another rock? If you're doing research, how much is research and how much is vandalism? Another issue, we all know how much illegal mining takes place all over South Africa, and in fact, all over Africa and worldwide, actually. Do we as geoscientists actually get involved in this? Do we give advice to people who are mining illegally? And I'm not just making that up. It does happen. So we've looked at the three pillars of professionalism: registration in terms of statutory, SACNASP, as well as professional, the GSSA. We've had a look at the CPD, which is self-driven by you. It's a career-long development of competencies. Professional conduct, as well as competence and proficiency. What we're going to do now is to have a look at various issues regarding ethics. And I think a way to try and understand what ethics is all about is to have a look at this very famous ethical dilemma, where you have a tram cart hurtling down along a railway line, and there are 5 people who are in the way. Now, this tram cart has no brakes, it has no driver, you can't stop it, it is hurtling along. You are here. You have the ability to flip the switch and send the train off the main tracks onto a siding. However, in the siding is a person doing his job repairing the rails. These 5 people here are civilians who are not working for the railway line or anything like that. They're just 5 random people who happen to be on the railway line. So what do? Do you allow the train to continue along the tracks to kill those 5 people? Or do you switch it to kill that one person? Any thoughts? Think about it. Not going to ask you to answer it. Some of the other things that you might want to think about at the same time is, well, do you kill one person to save 5? Would it matter if this person was a child or an old person? Would it make a difference to our way of thinking if we know this one person and the other 5 are strangers to us? Does it matter that these are random civilians and this person is a worker? Would it make a difference to your way of thinking if these are of a different race, a different tribe, a different gender, or a different nationality to you or to each other? Is there a difference between allowing someone to die, like not doing anything and let the train continue, or making a positive choice to actually kill somebody by flipping the switch and moving the train off there? To take this dilemma even further, if you are up on the bridge, and you happen to be up on the bridge with a very large person, would you push them off the bridge onto the tracks, because that might derail the train and save these 5 people? Is there a difference between pushing the fat man and flipping the switch, as we saw in the previous slide? Now, the way in which you reasoned to get your answers in this example is as a result of your personal ethics. Now, in the hierarchy of ethics, we have meta-ethics, normative ethics, and applied ethics. Meta-ethics, well, that this deals with what is right and what is wrong. Who gets to decide what is right and why they do? And should one culture's notion of justice or right and wrong be imposed upon somebody else? And you'll be very glad to hear that as the last we're going to say about meta-ethics. The next field of ethics, well, this looks at ideas about what is good and bad. It looks at how people make decisions regarding what is right and what is wrong. There are a number of different theories, things such as, would you make your decision based on consequences? But then the question is, well, who decides what is moral and what isn't? What is your duty? Are you showing care to others? Do you look outside yourself for guidance as to what is ethical or moral? Or do you decide for yourself or within your community what is right? Irrespective of how we make our decisions, defining what is right or wrong is a very different thing. It requires that we look at the situation and make a value judgment. And that value judgment is always subjective, and it depends upon such things as your background, your culture, your religious convictions or lack thereof, your historical experiences, and so forth. And we would look at concepts such as fairness and justice. And these are not always easy to define because everybody has different life experiences, different backgrounds. And this is going to impact on what we view as being right and fair. So, who's right? If we live in a society or in a workplace where everyone has their own set of values and they all have their own way of making decisions, that's going to just be total chaos and potential for conflict. But this is where society steps in and creates a set of accepted norms for that society or that group within that society. And this is where we get to the field of applied ethics. Now, applied ethics are found everywhere, whether it be as part of our research, business ethics, or otherwise corporate governance, things such as geoethics, and then our professional ethics. At a broad scale, we have statements of geoethics. These are based on pure ethics principles, and they're not enforceable anywhere. What geoethics is, it deals with the, as it says here, the ethical, the social, and cultural implications of geoscience knowledge. And at a broad scale, it is there to improve the quality of work, to foster excellence in geoscience, and to assure sustainable benefits. Now, what I've got here over the next two slides is the Cape Town Statement of Geoethics, which is done in association with the IAPG, the International Association for Promoting Geoethics. Now, I'm not going to go through them. It's there for you to read and refer to when you get the presentation. What's more applicable to us on a more day-to-day scale is the ethics that we have to deal with is known as professional ethics. And this is really the formal structured world of us as geoscientists. While it might be based on the principles of applied ethics, it is more obligatory to members, and it's backed by a robust complaints and disciplinary process. Now, this here shows us what are the most likely things that we will have to face during our career. We're seldom going to be worried about whether we need to stop a train or push somebody off of a bridge. But we will be looking at things such as ensuring legal compliance, whistleblowing issues, conflicts of interest, bribery and kickbacks, moonlighting, plagiarism and copyright issues. And believe me when I tell you that through your career, you will encounter more than one of these, and probably more often than only once. So in the world of professional ethics, we have a hierarchy of codes. The top, we have the code of ethics. Now, this is often referred to as a value statement. So it's like the Constitution with general principles. So when you're faced with an ethical dilemma, you go to the code of ethics, and those principles will then help you to make the decision that you need to make. Second is the code of conduct. Now, what a code of conduct does is it takes the principles of the code of ethics and it applies it to specific situations. For example, in the code of ethics, it might say that you need to obey the law. But the code of conduct will actually list the specific laws that you would need to obey. Now, we find specific codes of conduct at the university, at the statutory professional bodies, corporate codes of conduct. These might all differ in the detail with respect to content and expectations, and they can be company specific, but they're not going to be contradictory to each other. Then the third one that we look at is the code of practice. And the code of practice is very specific. So a company can have one code of ethics, one code of conduct, but it can have many codes of practice. And these codes of practice are often supported by or associated with other industry standards and so on and so forth. And the only one that I'm going to highlight is the mineral reporting codes. This is the one that most of you are going to be working with or are working with. Now, there is a recording on the GSSA YouTube, which is free to watch. It's a 5-day introduction to the SAM codes. Do yourself a favor and go and watch that if you're not familiar with it. But also look out for similar courses that the GSSA, SAIMM have on SAM codes. Also, go to the SAM codes website as well. Okay, so after that little bit of diversion, your company, your organization has a code of ethics, it has a code of conduct. What happens if we transgress, either by accident or by choice? Most organizations have a process in place to enforce these norms. And this is typically a condition of membership or employment. In the GSSA, our complaints and disciplinary process, everything is referenced back to the code of ethics and the code of conduct. Anybody can complain or lodge a complaint against breaches of the codes. Mostly these cases are handled internally. But if the cases are significantly serious, they may be passed on to SACNASP or even onto the judicial system if you have an issue of criminal intent. It's important to highlight that the purpose of the complaints procedure is not to beat somebody about the ears. The objective is to improve behaviors. It's a self-regulatory procedure. We want to keep all this within the profession. We want to be judged, for lack of a better word, by our peers, rather than some random external, generally legal person. And particularly where things that we do might be without dishonesty, without intent, without reckless incompetence, we want to improve behaviors, not simply to punish honest mistakes. It is also not a forum to settle private schools or professional and academic differences of opinion. And this is particularly important. It is not ethical to make a petty complaint or to use the system to settle differences if you have a professional difference of opinion. Also, the complaints procedure shouldn't be the first thing that enters our mind if we have a situation. There are many informal ways to deal with it before the situation gets out of hand. We're adult people. Firstly, unless it is a serious professional case of misconduct, go to your colleague privately and discuss it with them. If that doesn't work, perhaps take a senior person along with you to be able to discuss it. And it's only if all of these efforts at remedial action fail, or as I said earlier, if it's a case of serious professional misconduct, it's only at that stage that one goes about invoking the formal complaints process. Okay, we're now going to spend a few moments looking at the GSSA Code of Ethics itself. Ethical leadership is essential, irrespective of the role that you play. It's about so much more than just following a set of rules. It's also about complying with ethical principles in all aspects of your life, whether it be personal or professional. You're going to encounter situations where there are no hard and fast rules, or the rules might not be clear, and you have to make your own decision. Responsible professionals need to be willing to identify these issues and create solutions to them, even if you don't have clearly stated rules, because you cannot have clearly stated rules for absolutely every situation that's going to arise in your life. Please download the GSSA Code of Ethics from the GSSA website. File it in a safe place, because you are going to meet situations where you will need them. The GSSA Code of Ethics is benchmarked against other international geoscience organizations. And it doesn't matter whether you are an academic or an applied geoscientist. If you are a member of the GSSA, you are obligated to comply with the Code of Professional Conduct, which also implies that you accept the codes, associated codes of practice, and submit yourself to the complaints and disciplinary procedure. In the preamble to the code, again, it highlights the fact that if you're looking at issues without dishonesty, without intent, without reckless incompetence, these should result only in personal counseling or admonition. It's only when you get to more serious breaches that we would start looking at things such as suspension, expulsion, and so forth. Okay, so clause 1. Now this is the Code of Ethics part. It's the principle. In conducting professional activities, the responsibilities of members for the welfare, health, and safety of the community should at all times come before the responsibility to the profession, to sectional or private interests, clients or employers, or to other members. So your prime responsibility, your prime directive is for the welfare, health, and safety of the community. Now, the specific clauses that deal with that. You would want to avoid assignments that create a conflict between your client and the public interest. Work in conformity with acceptable technological standards and not in a way so as to jeopardize public welfare, safety, or health. Maintain technological services essential to public welfare. Endeavor to promote the well-being of the community. If your judgment is overruled in this matter, inform your client or employer of the possible consequences, and if appropriate, notify the proper authorities. And if you can do so, constructively advance the well-being of the community, contribute to public discussion on scientific and technical matters within your area of competence. And I'm sure you can all identify in your own mind issues that you have dealt with or could potentially deal with, which would reflect the clauses here. Clause 2, uphold and enhance the honesty, honor, integrity, and dignity of the profession. Well, what that means is you would not be involved with any business or professional practice that is known to be fraudulent or dishonest. You wouldn't use association with other persons, corporations, or partnerships to conceal unethical acts and relationships. You would not knowingly continue in partnership with or act in professional manners with any person who has been removed from the society because of unprofessional conduct. Okay, this doesn't mean somebody who has resigned for whatever reasons. It's only because they've been removed because of unprofessional conduct. You would give your professional advice based on an opinion that is objective and reliable. And you would always ensure that these people know, if you give them advice, what the consequences, serious consequences could be if they don't take that advice. This is a one that often causes problems, that members should not take on the functions of an expert in fields other than their own, or accept professional obligations that they are not competent to discharge. If you're doing work for somebody, if your assignment requires qualifications and experience outside of what you're doing, outside of your field of competence, make sure that your employer or client knows about it. When describing yourself, don't indicate that you are able to do more than you actually are doing. And again, if you're giving a professional opinion, writing a report, or giving legal testimony, make sure that you base your opinion, make sure that people know that you're basing your opinion upon relevant information, identify what information you are basing this on. Build your professional reputation on merit and not compete unfairly. So you would only approach your prospective clients or employers with regard to professional integrity based on this code of ethics. Uphold the principle of adequate and appropriate remuneration for professional staff. If you know somebody else has applied for a consulting job or has been appointed in a practice, don't go and tell them that you're actually better for the job. If you're doing consulting, do not undertake professional work on a basis that involves an undisclosed speculative fee or remuneration that is conditional on the implementation of the work, unless you disclose it. You can have whatever arrangement you want with your client, but make sure that it is not hidden. You wouldn't want to falsify or misrepresent your own or your associate's qualifications. And you certainly wouldn't do or say anything in order to injure the reputation, prospects, or businesses of competitors. You wouldn't use the advantages of a privileged position to compete unfairly with others. That's the important word, unfairly. You would exercise due restraint in explaining your own work and also refrain from unfair, unjustified criticism of others. Give proper credit for professional work. Coming back to plagiarism, which is brought in the next clause as well. Refrain from plagiarism in both oral and written communication. And be circumspect in your advertising. Always be truthful, factual, and free from ostentation. And clause 5 highlights the need to apply skill and knowledge in the interests of the employer or client and act in a professional manner when it comes to your employer or client. So you would avoid all known potential conflicts of interest. And this is not always easy, but you need to keep an eye out for conflicts of interest. You want to be impartial. You wouldn't accept compensation from more than one party for services on the same project, unless everybody knows about it. So you wouldn't work for 2 different clients on the same project at the same time and be paid by both of them. And you wouldn't accept considerations, whether it be financial or otherwise, from suppliers for specifying their products, again, unless fully disclosed. Soliciting or accepting gratuities. Advise your client or employer when, as a result of your studies, you believe that a project will not be viable. It's so easy for consultants to continue working on a project for months and years, recommending more work, additional work, when you know that that project is going to go nowhere. If your client decides they want to continue on with it, that's fine. That's their decision and you can well do it. But you need to advise them of your opinion of the project and then allow them to make their decision based on that. It also speaks to confidential information, how you use that information. Also, destroying calculations, documentary evidence required for verification of your work. This often comes up in competent persons reports when somebody makes a statement based on the calculations, the documents that I did, but no, we don't have them anymore, we destroyed them. Think about that one very carefully. Members shall give evidence, express opinions, or make statements in an objective and truthful manner and on the basis of adequate knowledge. So anything that you do or say should be objective and it should be accurate. You make your opinions based on adequate knowledge and technical competence. Obviously, it doesn't mean that you can't speculate as long as you state that this is what you are doing. And you also need to reveal if you have any interest in any project so that your client, your company can make an objective interpretation of the work that you have done for them. Members shall continue their professional development throughout their careers and shall actively assist and encourage those under their direction to advance their knowledge and experience. This refers back to the continuing professional development. By maintaining personal competence, by keeping abreast with what is happening in your field, encourage the professional development of all your employees and subordinates, and as far as possible, take a positive interest and also encourage your fellows to support the society and other professional organizations that are in the general interest of the profession. If you're involved in preparing public reports, make sure that you comply with all the laws and government regulations, and also the regulations and practices as established by the stock exchange. And this refers specifically to the requirement of GSSA members to abide by the SAM codes in all aspects of your work. So again, making sure that you understand the laws and regulations, not only in South Africa, but in other countries where you're working. And then also observe the requirements of the JSE with respect to the SAM codes and also the requirements of a competent person. Just want to go back to this one for a moment to inform yourself of the laws and requirements in South Africa and other countries where you are working. What would happen if the rules of the country where you are working are very lax, environmentally, socially, or even contradict basic human rights? Think about that in terms of that clause. And again, this highlights to comply with relevant laws and regulations of any country in which you work, including laws, regulations, policies, and practices regarding intellectual property. That is making sure that you understand the laws, conventions, and regulations, not only in South Africa, but wherever you're working, and also observe them. And this one particularly highlights the issue of intellectual property. And note that typically ownership of a report prepared for a company remains with the company and not the author, unless otherwise specified. Okay, so now that we've gone through the code of ethics, going to look at a number of case studies of situations that you might find yourself in. Think to yourself, how would you act under each of these conditions? Okay, so the first one, you've got you overhear two team members planning a dinner at an expensive restaurant. The team leader says that he'll expense it. No one will know because we still have money in a project budget. What do you do? Remember, it is each individual's personal decision what they do. You cannot generally influence what other people do, so you make sure that you do the right thing, which would be either paying for your own dinner or not going along at all. because something like this generally does become known to management. You're hiring a new position, and you've got two candidates. First one is in late 40s with children, and the other is a recent graduate. Both are qualified. Believe that the candidate who is older with the responsibility of children is more likely to be committed to the company long term, and is probably the right choice. Is this the correct reason for hiring somebody? No. You may not hire on any protected characteristics such as age, gender, or ethnicity. Needs to be made on qualifications and merit. If your work requires frequent travel and you find yourself reviewing information about customers and projects at the airport or riding the train or the bus or whatever, what are some of the things that you should keep in mind while doing this? We would need to take whatever steps to protect the confidentiality of the business information and avoid discussing confidential information where people might be able to overhear what you were saying. If you receive a request for a list of company contacts from an event coordinator of a trade conference, for example, is it okay to provide the list? Short answer is no. Remember, the POPI Act requires that all personal data and contact data must be kept and held in compliance with POPI. If you notice a racially offensive statement from your co-worker on a social media site, how do you deal with that? And of course, there are many things that you can do and many ways that you can deal with it. But one of the important things is highlighted here, that before you do anything else, you would first go to that person and raise it with them. Doesn't mean you can't take it further. It just means go to that individual first. Working on a project with a customer in another country. Do you need approval from a government inspector before we can move forward? He suggests that the company offer the inspector a gift, like a paid trip to a nearby beach resort. What do you do? Well, it sounds like a bribe because it is a bribe. These sorts of activities are not permitted under most corporate policies, under most under all codes of ethics. And it's not to say it's the easiest thing to do, because you might just hold up the project indefinitely. But ethics is about more than simply a corporate advancement. How about an invitation to what is seemingly a very pleasant and the way would you go about that? You'd look at the value of the gift and whether accepting the invitation would create the appearance of bias. would accepting that gift influence the decision that you make to give future business to this person? If you're looking to hire somebody and you have a relative who is looking for a job, who is the perfectly qualified person for that job. If you were the supervisor on this project, would you hire your relative or your friend? This is a difficult one because it creates the appearance of a conflict. So it might be that this person is the perfectly qualified person and should be hired. The important thing is that the relationship needs to be disclosed, and also preferably ask an independent review of this individual so that when they are hired, it doesn't cause an appearance of conflict for you. If you see somebody else doing something which is illegal, do you just sit back and say, well, it's not my problem, it's them doing it? Again, go to that individual first. Raise it with them. But also you do need to take it further, because illegalities will come back and bite you. If you notice an error that benefits your company, but may disadvantage your client, in this particular situation here, the customer made the error and that inflated the costs. It's going to mean more income for your company. What do you do about it? Raise it with them. They will appreciate it and they will come back to you a second time. You've been working on a potentially industry-changing project. And great project, and you want to talk about it with your friends. Well, remember, if you speak to people about material non-public information, it could, as we mentioned earlier, be a violation of insider trading laws, because you then give other people an unfair advantage in the marketplace, because they then have access to information that the rest of the world doesn't have. You meet a colleague at a conference. That colleague now works for a competitor, and you get together for dinner to catch up on life and your projects. What do you need to keep in mind? Obviously, meet up and talk about personal matters. But don't talk about company projects, company contracts, customers, strategies, and so forth. Don't you ask them, and don't you talk about what you're doing, or ask them information on what they are doing. If you need to send documents to a new project, to somewhere else. But you also know that that data or the projects need to be licensed or approved before being exported. What do you do? Well, don't guess. Also, don't assume that it's not your business where that all the paperwork is in order. Make sure to get all the advice that you need to make sure that all of your procedures are being followed. Make sure that you are in the right, irrespective of what other people are doing. And then finally, just a few quotations here to impress upon you the absolute importance of ethical behavior. As Warren Buffett said, it takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And so at that stage, I would like to say thank you very much for all of your time. And if anybody has any questions, we can have a look at them now. Anybody still there, or have you all fallen asleep?
Still here.
Okay, folks, thank you very much for your time this morning. You will all get a certificate of attendance and a link to the recording, as well as the presentation for future references. And I hope to see many of you at the CPD course in March of next year.